This is the Brexit that I voted against. I'm Mike Cashman. I'm the author of It's My Party and I Lie If I Want To, with Augusta Lees and other works. But I'm here to talk about this is the Brexit that I voted against. Now, this goes with the statement that many people make of this is not the Brexit that I voted for. And if you, for example, are saying that, then I accept it. I accept that you may look at what's happened and say, this isn't what you wanted. Fair enough. If I accept your position, and if I accept for the sake of argument that you had positive and valid motivations for voting leave, and I have no reason to suppose otherwise. Look, I'm sure there are people that voted leave with valid and positive motives, and they may have been from their own perspective, that's fine. I have no need to suggest unworthy motives for anyone voting leave. I don't think that would be fair for any particular person, and I also don't think it's helpful. I don't think anybody gets persuaded by being abused. So, if you're saying this is not the Brexit that I voted for, then yes, I believe you, I accept your position. Would you please accept my position when I say this is the Brexit that I voted against? So, just to ensure that I wasn't imagining this in hindsight, I've had a look back at what I posted on social media in 2016. Now, I was much less active at that point. I hadn't written any of these books. I didn't have a YouTube channel. I'm largely talking about posting on Facebook. So I'm not saying that you should have looked at it. Some of these posts weren't public. They probably only went to a relatively small number of people until I wrote a song called Brexitian Fantasy, which did get shared hundreds of times in June 2016. But before that, as I say, I'm not saying loads of people read this, but to support my statement that this is the Brexit that I voted against, I've looked back at some of what I posted in 2016. And I said, are we about to elect a government with no manifesto where we don't know what it is that they'd be doing? Are we about to make a change where nobody is accountable for it? I said, given that Brexit would, as far as we can see, damage our economy, then I know Brexiters are arguing for Britain having greater influence in the world, but how are we going to have influence? How are we going to have greater influence with that damaged economy? I said constitutional changes need big majorities to work well. Otherwise, you've got perhaps a slim majority of those who voted, which is actually a minority of the total electorate, attempting to make a major change, which at the time of making the change, as far as you're aware, that might have to be a one-way gate. You have no guarantee of being able to come back. I said this sort of change is difficult and lengthy. It's inevitably more risky. That's my view from my own experience. I did at one stage quote Boris Johnson talking about leaving the EU single market. An exit, he said, would have the effect of embroiling the government for several years in a fiddly process of negotiating new arrangements, so diverting energy from the real problems of this country: low skills, low social mobility, low investment that have nothing to do with Europe. That's Boris Johnson. But while I did post some articles by people who might have been expected to know what they were talking about, such as Boris Johnson, a lot of this was things that I was posting from my own experience. Change being difficult and lengthy. All large-scale change takes far longer than originally forecast. Doesn't really matter what it is. This is a common experience. Change is difficult and lengthy. And I said if you examine the arguments on both sides, it's noticeable that a lot of the Leave campaigners are saying we would, while the Remain campaigners are a lot more likely to be arguing this is certainty. And, that's inevitable because the Leavers are talking about an uncertain future. Large-scale change takes far longer than originally forecast. Doesn't really matter what it is. In kind of more than 50 years of observing and sometimes commenting on our politics, how often do you encounter the situation where you ask a politician, well, Dr. Bloggs, can you explain to us how your initiative was achieved so much faster and easier than anybody imagined? This is roughly never happens. It's partly because we're naturally over-optimistic. Enthusiasm for change ignores the real-world problems. Partly because the enthusiasts for change want to persuade us that change is achievable. And it's partly most things are much more complicated than we realise. And nobody is ever really accountable for delivering the change, as we've seen with the Leave campaign. People start a process, but for one reason or another, do not carry it through, and the ball is passed to somebody else. I said supposedly the Brexit divorce, if it happens, should be negotiated within 2 years, but plenty of informed opinion says it could take much longer. Of course it would. And even if there are net benefits for being out, I don't believe there are, but just suppose there are, it would be a long, hard, costly road to reach them. So these are things that I wrote mostly in May 2016 and shared on social media. I don't think that there's anything of it that I would change. Okay, in hindsight, yes, I'm more informed, but I don't think that anything of what I wrote there is wrong. The problems of Brexit were well predicted, and sorry, Kwasi I have said this before, but nobody ever predicted the problems with the Northern Ireland Protocol? Sorry, many of us did. I was in the national press and in letters to the government acknowledged by the Department for Exiting the European Union, pointing out the difficulties with the Northern Ireland Protocol. And so, looking at what's happened, this may not be the Brexit that some people voted for, though it is a Brexit that was enabled by their votes. It may not be the Brexit that some people have voted for, but it is the Brexit that I voted against. This is what I did not want to happen.